keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk, dear Lord, close to Thee. Just a closer walk with Thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea. Daily walking close to Thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. Through this world of toil and snares, if I falter, Lord, who cares? Who with me my burden shares? None but Thee, dear Lord, none but Thee. Just a closer walk with Thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea. Daily walking close to Thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. When my feeble life is o'er, time for me will be no more.
All right. Now it's going to work for a little while at least. So verses 13 through 23 is the next block. For the benefit of those that are joining us online, God is defining in Leviticus chapter 11 what is clean and what is unclean. Verses 3 through 8 covered land animals. Verses 9 through 12 talked about the creatures in the water. And the next block is verses 13 through 23. You shall detest among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They are detestable. Detest, that's a strong word. The eagle, the bearded vulture, the black vulture, the kite, the falcon of any kind, every raven of any kind, the ostrich, the night hawk, the seagull, the hawk of any kind, the little owl, and I don't think that's young owl. I think that's some variety that was a small owl. The little owl, the cormorant, the short-eared owl, the barn owl, the tawny owl, the carrion vulture of Carencrow fame. That's what Carencrow is named after. The carrion vulture, the stork, the heron of any kind, the hoopoe, and the bat. One of these things does not. We were in the same place. Just out of thin air, we've got a mammal here stuck in here in a list of birds. But it flies. It flies. I don't know about the bat either. Now, see, I was talking with Micah before we started. Why these birds? Does it give any indication of why these birds are unclean? None. Zero at all. But not only does it say that they're unclean, it actually takes a step further than that. It says that you're supposed to do what? Detest them. Now, some of them are detestable. Some of those vultures and stuff, if you've never been around a vulture nest, it is not pleasant. You can smell them from a good distance away. Not a pleasant thing. But that's not true of every bird on this list. And not all these birds are birds that feed off of dead things. That not all of them are scavengers. Some of them are hunting predators. that can't make them unclean because humans also killed animals to eat them. So there's not any reason beyond what? This list. And one of the more common things that you get among commentators is that these dietary laws were to distinguish them from the lands around there and the diets that they ate and the way, and there be something to that. It certainly did that. It still does that to this day. Um, but I'm not sold that that's the reason either. Sometimes you do things purely for the pedagogy of the act. There's not a real good reason for doing it in that particular way beyond the fact that you are teaching. And a lot of times you get into a school situation. A lot of times what you're teaching is for the students to do what? Follow rules. The reason why there is a rule is to teach them to follow rules. It's the only reason the rule exists. Because what happens, and for those that have been in a classroom setting, either as a student, but more importantly as a teacher, what happens if you get a group of students in a class that don't follow rules? They are going to fail. But listen, bedlam happens. And the younger they are, the worse it is. It just becomes completely undisciplined. It's noisy. It is confusing. Um, Here's a principle for you. 1 Corinthians 14, the end of that discussion about the use of spiritual gifts among believers in the first century. We've got are spiritual gifts a good thing? Yes, they're given by God for a purpose. Um, was it an honor to have such a gift? I would think so. They certainly thought so, especially the ones that could speak in tongues. They thought that was a particular honor. Was it for the benefit of people that these gifts were given? But if there wasn't any discipline used in the exercise of the gifts, what happened instead of good? Chaos. So sometimes there are rules simply for the sake of preventing the chaos that comes in the absence of any rules. The decision about whether a street should be 35 miles an hour or 40 miles an hour, a lot of times it might not would matter on the grand scheme of things. But the question is, am I going to follow the rule? And if I disregard something like that, what else am I training myself to disregard? So part of this is just rule keeping, just teaching people the principle that some things are clean and some things are not clean, and who defines what's clean and unclean? God. That's what's being taught here. You don't decide what's clean and what's good. I tell you what's clean and what's good. And then you follow. Uh, Everyone who is a parent has gone through that with their children where they basically say, look, I'm doing this for your own good. Just listen to me and do what I say. And every parent ever in history has, on at least one occasion, but probably many, many more, had a child that just rebelliously chose to ignore. Now you know how God feels. And sometimes when they do that, what happens? They get hurt. And you're tempted to say, see, I told you. You should have just did what I told you to do in the first place, and this wouldn't have happened. I'm glad that God doesn't do that to me every time that I mess up. I would hear that a lot, probably. So we have this. And by the way, why is bat on this list? Yeah, yeah. There's not enough food to worry about anyway. Yeah. Uh, there's just a lot of weird stuff. One of the things again that Mike, the two things that are most apparent about the list of birds is that they either are scavengers or predators. So maybe it's just because they are in contact with dead things and we're not supposed to touch dead things. So, okay, maybe. What about the bat? What if bats eat bugs for the most part? They eat bugs, they catch insects. Guess what else eats bugs and insects? All the birds that are not listed here. So I don't think it's about their diet or even their behavior. I think it's purely an exercise of saying God doesn't leave his people to guess about things. God tells them what he wants. And holiness is defined by what he reveals to us, not by our preferences. I don't get to decide, but I really like the way that the spotted owl tastes. By the way, the spotted owl is not on this list. I really like the way the barn owl tastes. I don't get to decide that. Doesn't matter. I don't choose what's clean and what's unclean. I'm told what's clean and what's unclean. And so when we get into other areas of life, like sexual behavior, I don't get to say, but I like it. And nobody gets hurt from it. And all the other excuses that people come up with as a license to do something that God has said, don't do that. And even if there isn't some kind of immediate natural consequence to the behavior, does not mean that the behavior is not wrong. And we have to learn that. And God is teaching. Now, keep in mind, this is all also under the bigger umbrella, which is the point of this whole book about how a sinful man can be in fellowship with a sinless God. How man can be transformed from being afraid of being in God's presence to desiring to be in God's presence. Well, this is part of he's teaching people, he's teaching his people how they can have confidence in fellowship with him. To the point that by the time we get to the New Testament, it's with boldness that we enter in to the mercy seat of God. That's the exact opposite of fear. The exact opposite of being afraid to go before God is to boldly walk in before him. That's like Star Trek. Boldly go where no man has gone before. We're supposed to be, Captain Kirk. Let's just go in there and have our conversation. How can we get to that point that we're so comfortable with a relationship with God that we feel free to talk to him and to talk to him about anything? Well, this is one of the ways that we do. We learn to listen to his instructions and follow his instructions, and thereby realize that we have a relationship with him. I wasn't afraid of my mother unless I had done something wrong. And I was even more afraid of my stepfather when I did something wrong, because the consequences were different than when I did what was right. In fact, when we do what is right as children, what do we tend to do? Yeah, but as children, we tend to point out to our parents, look what I did. You see how I did this? I did this right. Why do we do that? We're proud, and we know that that's what they desire of us, and we want to make sure that they're aware that we did what. There's an aspect of that psychology that's in here too. If I'm doing what is right, then I want to let God know, as if he doesn't know. He already knows already, but I'm not afraid, and that's part of what's going on here. Did you have a comment or a question, Miss Karen? Yeah, but now I stopped with the bat. There's another section. There are other winged creatures in the world we do want to talk about. But I stopped with the bat intentionally because it's just a natural place to stop, number one, and it's an oddity. But how many different varieties of bats are there? And he doesn't specify which bat. So, I mean, I'm going to have to assume it's any bat because he's very specific about certain things, this kind of owl and this kind of owl and this kind of owl, and more broad with other things, any kind of hawk, any type of this, any type of this, any type of. He specifies the ostrich, but says nothing about the emu, which is just its smaller cousin. And all the emu farmers out there are going to send me messages and tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not an emu farmer, so I may be wrong, but they look the same and just a little bit shorter, and they're just about as mean too. The ones I've been around, at least. So I don't know that there is a specific thing that we can identify from the information that's here as far as why these particular animals are chosen. It's the fact that they have been chosen and listed and given to us, period, that is showing us that God is the one who defines this, not us. And the fact that he doesn't say, because this one doesn't taste good, or this one isn't healthy for you, or this one, because he doesn't give reasons like that, tells me that it doesn't matter what the reason is. It's the very fact that he said, not this. You can have this and not this. The first time we're introduced to that is what? In the Garden of Eden. And interestingly, he says to them, you can have anything except this one thing. And what was the temptation that the devil brought? He doesn't want to, he don't want you to have the good stuff. Did the Lord say you can't eat anything? No, he didn't say I can't eat anything. She was smart enough to pick up on that one, wasn't she? No, he didn't say that. He said I can eat anything except that. Oh, yeah, but what are you missing in that? From the very beginning, we're introduced to God saying, avoid this. Now, the knowledge of good and evil seems like it ought to be a good thing. But when they got the knowledge of good and evil, immediately what happened? They were separated from God and they were afraid of God. It wasn't good. It seemed good to them. It seemed good to her. It seemed good to look at. It seemed good to eat. It seemed good to make you wise. It seemed good. But in fact, the consequence of it was not good. If God had a reason for saying, you don't go and take knowledge for yourself, you let me give you knowledge, then maybe he has a reason for telling us the things that he tells us, for setting the limits that he sets. He has a reason for telling the ocean, thus far shall you go and no further. I'm actually grateful that he does that, because what happens when he releases that limit? We drown, the earth floods, because the water covers the whole earth if it's not limited and controlled. That's a teaching tool as well, so that we understand that the limits that God places on things are for our good, not to work against us. And so I have to assume that when he says, don't do this, that is for my good, and he decides that it's good for me not to eat or not to do or not to taste or not to touch. But when I start saying do not eat, do not taste, do not touch, that's a different thing altogether. All right, let's keep reading here. Where did I stop? 19. All winged insects is the next group. Now, what these have in common with the other things is the wings. All winged insects that go on all fours are detestable to you. Yet among the winged insects that go on all fours, you may eat those that have jointed legs above their feet, knees. And so what are we talking about? Grasshoppers, locusts, crickets, those kinds of things. Those you can eat. Those which hop on the ground, of them you may eat, the locust of any kind, the bald locust of any kind, the cricket of any kind, the grasshopper of any kind. But all other winged insects that have 4 feet are detestable to you. Why? I don't know. I'm going to tell you right now. I'm not eating a grasshopper, not on purpose. I know that there are people who do, and there are people who think that they are wonderful, and I'm glad for that. And if I catch them, I'll even give all that I have to them. Yeah. I might would do it if it was the difference between living and dying. Maybe. I'd probably have to think twice. Because I believe very much in this detestable to you thing. They're just one step above mayonnaise for me. Just one step. Or sour cream. Anyway, why locust, crickets, grasshoppers, why are they okay and other insects not okay? I don't know. Does it matter? This is the limit God placed. By these you shall become unclean. Now there's where he finally introduces the word unclean. If you're touching, eating, engaging with these forbidden winged creatures, you become unclean. But again, we have to point out here that is not a death sentence to become unclean. To stay unclean is a death sentence. You don't have fellowship with God if you're unclean, but what did he also make provisions for? A process to become clean. So, are there some times, for instance, that you're going to have to touch a dead body? Yes, somebody at some point is going to have to touch a dead body. That made them unclean. But there was a way in which they could be cleansed again and restored into it. And so he's still teaching. He is also teaching us that just because we make a bad choice, just because we rebel against God and choose to do something that he has told us not to do, or I'll go ahead and throw this in there, refuse to do something that he's told us to do, that is not a forever end. There's still a way to find ourselves back in God's good graces. He's teaching them that as well. These things make you unclean. Oh, but I've done this, so I'm unclean. I get, well, he's going to get to it later and say, okay, if you're unclean, this is the process. This is what you have to do. And by the way, the point of that process is teaching how big a deal it is to be unclean. So that you understand that to be unclean is not some small thing, that it's a serious thing. So by these you shall become unclean. Whoever touches their carcass shall be unclean until the evening. Whoever carries any part of their carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. Every animal that parts the hoof, but is not cloven footed or does not chew the cud, is unclean to you. This is a repeat from earlier in the chapter. He's saying it again. Why do you say things twice? You want to make sure that the people understand. Everyone who touches them shall be unclean, and all that walk on their paws among the animals that go on all fours are unclean to you. Whoever touches their carcass shall be unclean until evening, and he who carries their carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. They are unclean to you. And these are unclean to you among the swarming things that swarm on the ground: the mole rat, the mouse, the great lizard of any kind, the gecko, the monitor lizard, the sand lizard, the chameleon. These are unclean among you. All that swarm, whoever touches them, when they are dead, shall be unclean until evening. So, eating these things are touching their dead bodies, will alter your state. And anything on which any of them falls when they are dead shall be unclean. So let's say you got a chameleon up in the tree, the chameleon dies, it falls off the tree, it lands on your favorite whatever. Yeah, there we go, blanket. Now your blanket's unclean. You got to do something with it. Or if you use it while it's unclean, guess what? You're unclean. And so we're getting some instruction about how sin affects people. And why, for instance, questions like, well, why do we have to withdraw fellowship from a believer who is not walking orderly? Because if you have fellowship with him and he's unclean, it affects you. And if having fellowship with him when he's unclean affects you, then you're having fellowship with God while you're unclean affects God. Only problem is that God can have no fellowship with darkness. So if I'm unclean, then I have no fellowship with God. So it matters what I do and where I go and who I engage with. Now, again, it's important. I'll go ahead and bring this up just to be abundantly clear. Jesus made it clear that the only way, well, I'll say, Paul makes it clear too in his letter to the Corinthian church, that the only way to avoid all sinners is to do what? To be out of this world entirely. So he said, when I wrote to you not to keep company with a sinner, I didn't at all mean with the sinners of the world, because then you'd have to leave the world completely. But as it is, I meant so-called brothers who engage in these kind of behaviors. Don't fellowship with them. Now, where Jesus talks about that is in his prayer in John 17, where he talks about his disciples, that he did not ask that God take them out of the world, but that God preserve them within the world. And so if we move around in this world from time to time, we are going to have to touch things. And by the way, Jesus exemplified that as well, because what did Jesus do? He touched lepers. He touched sinners. He touched the people came to him. He didn't have to touch them, but he touched them anyway. He was teaching as well that what he calls clean, we don't get to call unclean. So we have to think about all this, and the purpose for these regulations is to help us understand what it is required of us in order to maintain our fellowship with God. Anything on which any of them falls when they are dead shall be unclean, whether it's an article of wood or a garment or skin or a sack or any article that's used for any purpose. Maybe it's my favorite jacket, my favorite suit coat. I'm sorry, you just can't wear that anymore. Not until it has been cleansed. It must be put into water. What changed something from being unclean to clean? Had to be baptized. Had to be put into water. Had to be put into water, and it shall be unclean until the evening. Then it shall be clean. um, I think that there's some good, valuable things for us to learn in the efficacy of baptism here as well. Um, what was the mechanism by which something touching this thing made it unclean? I mean, if just a passing glance of one of these carcasses just barely rubbed against my jacket, how does that make my jacket too dirty for me to wear? It doesn't physically. And the washing of it, therefore, isn't what the mechanism is that makes this clean. It's the doing of it by faith that makes it significant. It is the awareness that that made it unclean and this makes it clean. And I don't want to be associated with what is unclean. I want to be associated with what is clean. And so this is the process. Well, the same thing for me as an individual. I am unclean because of my sin. If I don't want to be associated with what is unclean and the end that that brings, and I want to be associated with what is clean and what that brings, then I must be cleansed. What is the mechanism by which he told me that I could be cleansed? Arise and be baptized and wash away your sins. I don't see how that has any effect on my sins. It has the exact same effect as it. Listen, dipping my clothes in water is not going to clean them. We have washing machines and soap for a reason. And I don't just have soap at my house. I got a big giant thing of Lysol sanitary, whatever they call that stuff. Got a blue lid on it. It's got a white bottle. I don't know. I buy it in this huge gallon-sized jug from Costco or Sam's, and I didn't get paid for mentioning their names, but it's this big industrial-sized bottle, and I use it on almost all my clothes. You know why? I want them to be clean. And soap and water don't necessarily kill the germs. Well, this didn't kill some kind of microbiotics that got on your clothes because they touched a dead lizard and keeps you from getting some disease. That's not the point. The point is that you cleanse it. So now you know that it's clean and now I can wear it again. I can have fellowship with it when it's clean. I can't have fellowship with it when it's not. And it's the exact same thing. It was the coat before, it's the coat after, and it's the coat yet again. It didn't change. Its status changed. It went from being clean to being unclean to being clean again. And that teaches us something. When you have a friend, a family member, a neighbor, a coworker who lives in sin and is thereby spotted and stained by sin, does that devalue them? No. They're just not clean. All that has to happen for them to change is what? For them to be cleansed. And so this idea of feeling better than people who are not as righteous as we are is ridiculous. They are exactly like us. The only thing that's different is we've been washed.
See that with the Jews too, though, right? Like where they're like, "Oh, I'm clean, and I'm doing everything I can to always stay clean, and I'm really worried about whether or not I'm clean, and I look down on people for things that are unclean." It's like that's not a new thing, a new volume, right? Like that.
Right.
Is a
It's,
problem we have.
it's been around for a long time. And I'm better because I'm of better stock. The pure blood Jews look down their noses at the half breed Samaritans. The fact of the matter is, Christ died for all of them. And Christ always intended to die for all of them. And here's where you'll get the next step. Guess what? Ultimately, they all came from the same family. There's a lesson for us to learn. Verse 33, if any of them falls into an earthenware vessel, what's an earthenware vessel? A pot, piece of pottery. You cook in these things. You carry water in these things. If any of them falls into an earthenware vessel, all that is in it shall be unclean, and you shall break it. Sorry, that can't be replaced. You just got to, that goes to the trash heap. Why didn't you get to just wash it? I don't know. I mean, it is, but I don't think there's anything inherent about the thing touching it that makes it somehow poisonous to you. So he's teaching us that some things just go too far. Any food in it that could be eaten on which water comes shall be unclean. And all drink that could be drunk from every such vessel shall be unclean. And everything on which any part of their carcass falls shall be unclean, whether oven or stove, it shall be broken to pieces. How about that for a task, Mom? That because you got some a mouse trap out because there's a mouse that's coming in your house. The mouse gets caught, flips over onto your stove. Now your whole stove's got to be thrown out and thrown away. That's essentially what he's saying here. It shall be broken in pieces. They are unclean and shall remain unclean for you. I think that's interesting too, for you. The addition of that language. They're not inherently unclean necessarily, they're unclean for you. So we're getting this lesson that some things you just don't mess with. When God says, this is wrong, don't touch it, you'll try to figure out a way to make it right. It's just wrong. Nevertheless, a spring or a cistern holding water shall be clean, but whoever touches a carcass in them shall be unclean. Get this. Okay, I want you to, if anything would be polluted by it, it should be the cistern or the spring, right? But he says, no, the cistern and the spring, it's okay. But when you touch the animal to get it out, you're unclean. You can keep drinking the water in the cistern, but you're unclean because you touched the animal. That again tells me that it's not about sanitary things. That's not what's going on here. What's going on here is God is setting parameters and showing that he dictates what is good and what is evil. And our job is to listen to his instructions. Whether we understand why or not does not matter. It's great if we do understand why, but doesn't matter. I just obey. All right, I got to stop. I didn't quite finish. Lord willing, 41 through 45. We'll do some application stuff very briefly after that, and then move into chapter 12 week after next.
I am weak, but thou art strong. Jesus, keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk, dear Lord, close to thee. Just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea.